so we're in this it's Underdog series, which, as you know, we started this last week. Terence started it last week, and he talked about Joseph the dreamer. And he talked about how Joseph, he had this dream as a young child, and probably wasn't very mature about the way he handled it. So he kind of went and told people, got into a little bit of bother, and he ended up having to go through several painful experiences in his life. But God was bringing it all around into the right place. And Paul, we're okay, mate, sorted. No problem. We're okay. Unless you're not okay. Something in there. So he was this dreamer that he probably wasn't those type of people you probably know what I'm talking about. They have the dreamers, but they don't really have any practical ways to kind of put things into practice, if you know what I mean. Usually the practical people get frustrated with the dreamers, and the dreamer people get just feel like the practical people are just boring and just trying to put all sorts of things on top of them and make them do something they don't want to do. But I'm actually going to springboard off the Joseph the dreamer message and talk about Nehemiah the builder, who was probably one of the more practical people in the Bible. But I remember when, most of you know my story about when I had the car accident, and you know how long it took me to heal. And I remember that first year though, being stuck in bed. And I don't know if you've ever spent a long period of time, I don't mean like a laying, like a long period of time in bed. Some of you need to spend less time in bed. But if you've ever been like bed bound, so you can't even get out of bed, it's pretty really rough really. It is like being in a prison. And you do literally start to really resent even the wallpaper and stuff like that. I remember like looking at the wallpaper for patterns and stuff. It sounds really ridiculous, but when you're that bored, because there's nothing else you can do, I'm following patterns on the wallpaper and stuff. And if you've ever experienced that, it is really, really difficult. And I remember just being stuck in that and feeling very much trapped. And I had to go through an awful lot of physio. So the physiotherapist would come to the house and they would get me out of bed. And I remember when they first started coming, literally the best I could do is stand up. Because I'd stand up and I'd be in that much pain. And that was like a win, if you like. How long can you stand up for? 10 seconds? 20 seconds? And gradually, bit by bit, I'd keep coming, and gradually I'd get up and I'd take a few steps. I remember taking a few steps and thinking, wow, can't believe I got this far. And then, you know, as time went on, I gradually did more and more, so I'd walk to the doorway of the living room. My bed was in the living room at the time. And then gradually, I was able to walk to the front door so they could like take me up and wheel me out into the ambulance and go for my checkups and all that stuff. But I still wasn't really well enough to go out of the house. Then it got a bit further, so I started taking more steps. And so I managed to make it into the kitchen. This is all over a period of months. About probably the first year, I was probably not really in a position to go out and do much. I missed so much church at that time in my life. And but eventually I got to the point where I could walk, so far into the kitchen and then walk out again. And I'm actually supposed to be building this as we speak. And so that was kind of like exciting. I was kind of going to the kitchen. Wow. Hello. So that's my double chins coming to play. And I remember one day actually managing to get into the kitchen so far up to the sink, and I started thinking, wow, I can maybe actually do something when I'm here. And so I got to the point where I could walk to the kitchen and like stand there for a bit, to get more and more and more. And eventually one day I realised if I kind of held on to a work surface, then I could probably get like a cup out and make myself a drink if I can kind of hobble around on the work surfaces. And bit by bit, I became to do stuff. I remember when my nan, bless her, she passed away last year. She's a really caring person. And so she would be like, let me get you a drink. And I'm like, No. Because it was something that I could actually do at that point. And like making myself breakfast, I got to the point where I got really good at carrying things even while using crutches. And I remember walking in and making breakfast for the first time and feeling such a sense of achievement. And afterwards thinking, how dumb is that? Like you feel so pleased with yourself because you can make yourself breakfast. But that's how I felt. And then my nan would say, like, you want me to make some breakfast? I'm like, no, I want to get it. She's like, no, seriously, I'll get it. I'm like, no, I want to get it because I want to be like doing it for myself. And but bit by bit, I got more and more capable of doing stuff. But it was a real journey to get there. And I guess what I'm trying to say is this, sometimes some things are just step by step. Literally, step by step, moment by moment. And there's a saying that most people, they underestimate what they can do in the long term and they overestimate what they can do in the short term, right? It's a police car. I built that whilst I was talking. It's amazing that you can have all sorts of little pieces and you pull them all together and it makes something. And Nehemiah was this type of person. He wasn't a dreamer. He was someone who was able to just step by step, he wanted to build something. And that's what he did. He built a wall. He built something that he could, no one else could do it. He was looking at it and thinking, right, someone has to do this. And so we need someone to go in, to step in and to build. And that's what he did. He's a builder. Builders get things done. And so as we're looking at underdogs at the moment, I want to encourage you. In fact, recently someone gave me an illustration once about how, you can have like a watch that's full of cogs, right? And it only takes just a very, very tiny cog to be out of place for that watch to not work. And sometimes you can feel like you're a very tiny piece of the puzzle, you're a very tiny cog, but actually, when we all come together and we build together, we make something pretty amazing. And so I want to encourage you this morning to become a builder. I think every part of life works this way. I think if you want a great house, you have to build it. You have to pick out the right picture to put on the wall and the right colour paint. Don't get wallpaper. It's boring. Actually, I suppose it's not really, but for me it is because I'm just that sick of looking at it. But everything takes time. If you want to have a successful career, you have to take the time to build it, step by step. You can't just overnight be put into a position or get that pay rise. You have to take the time, put in the hours, do the work. Now, the Bible says that unless the Lord builds the house, the labourers labour in vain. And so I read that and I think that it's quite a symbiotic relationship. That there are labourers, that's us, we have to do the work, but unless, like what Terence was saying earlier, unless God's actually part of the building process, it's kind of pointless. Because what God does is he throws his power at our action. When we do something, when we start to build something in his name, he throws his power at it and makes it work. It's a little bit like Noah. Noah built the ark. That must have been a massive job to do. Bit by bit, he built the ark. But it was God who gave him the precise instructions to enable him to do it. And we can build without God, right? That's obvious, right? We're all, you can build in life without God. But the Bible gives a really good illustration about how that doesn't really work very well. That's called Babel, the Tower of Babel. Human beings came together and they built something pretty big. But because it wasn't there to honour God, it was there to honour themselves. God just obliterated it and got rid of it. And so we need to be people that connect God in with the things that we're building. And there's one guy in the Bible, Nehemiah, who connected with his God-given mandate to build. And that's what we're going to look at. So if you've got your Bibles today, then I want to encourage you to turn to Nehemiah. And we're going to just look at a few different parts of Nehemiah. It's one of those books that's a little bit difficult to find. It's near Job. There we go, I found it. I'm going to put my police car away. Just in case anyone's worried. Any unspent convictions or anything like that going on. So this is the first thing we learn about about Nehemiah. It says in Nehemiah 1 verse 1, it says, the words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev, which is January, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men. And I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. So here's a guy, and we later read that he is the cupbearer for the king, right? Which sounds really, really auspicious. Sounds like a really, really important job. And it is an important job. It's not a very safe job, though. Right? He didn't put people in it that he wanted to keep around. You know, his job essentially was to drink what the king would drink, and if he died, the king probably wouldn't drink it, I would imagine, because he was obviously concerned for his health. So his job was essentially to die or to not die, and to protect the king from that. And so it kind of sounded like a job where he was quite close to the king, but really he was there because the whole Judah had been taken into captivity. So they were called exiles, which basically means a lot of them have been taken out of the country that they had come from, Israel, and they were forced into forced labor. So he was essentially a slave. He didn't really have much options. He had to do what he was told. And what he would happen to be told was, you have to drink this before I have a drink. I'm pretty sure that breaks all the food and hygiene rules, the way, Rosie. Drinking someone else's drink before you give it to them. So that's what we learn about him. So that's the position he's in. He's in a position of slavery. So he's not really in a good position. So however you feel right now, and the whole purpose of this series is to illustrate that no matter what position you feel you're in, whether you feel you're in a very low down position, or you feel as if you're kind of downtrodden, or you feel as if you haven't got much opportunities in life, it doesn't matter when you connect yourself with God. And so Nehemiah's in this position. So they said to me, this is telling them about Jerusalem, about the war around Jerusalem, those who survived the exiles, or some left behind, are back in the province and are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And then he goes on to pray. The first thing we learn about Nehemiah, or first thing we can learn from Nehemiah, is you build what you care about. Nehemiah decided to build the wall. Why? Because it absolutely destroyed him to think that Israel was in disgrace like that. I mean, I don't know, he probably might not be able to relate to it, but essentially, if the walls are broken down, it tells the whole of all the nations that surround him that Jerusalem is vulnerable. The Israelites, the Jewish people are vulnerable to attack. They're left that way on purpose after an invading force has gone in, and they're not allowed to rebuild it, because by rebuilding it, you're saying, hey, we're rebuilding our defences. So actually, it's quite threatening to actually rebuild it. But even that being the case, it was an embarrassment to them, and he was absolutely heartbroken that it was still in that condition. So he prayed, "Oh God, oh Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and obey his commands. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's house, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees and laws you gave your servant Moses." Remember the instruction. It goes on. And at the very end he says, "I was cupbearer to the king." So he decides to go and to speak to the king, and he asks God at the end of the prayer for favour with the king. And he goes and speaks to the king. And actually what he does is he walks in, I don't know what he did, but he said that the king recognised he was sad. I said, I've never been sad before in his presence. So I don't know where he kind of walked in with his bottom lip out or something. I don't know. But the king seemed to recognise that he was upset and said, what's the problem? And he begins to explain to him what the problem is. And the king was sympathetic. Didn't have to be. This is someone he's conquered. This is a nation that he's conquered. But the king says, "Okay, I will allow you to do that." God answers his prayer. And he even sends some resources with Nehemiah along the way. So the first thing we learn about Nehemiah is that what you care about, you build. If you care about your home, you'll build it. If you care about this church, you'll build it. If you care about your career, you will build it. You won't build what you don't care about. I watched a film, it's an old film now, called Kingdom of Heaven. Anyone watch that film? Yeah, it's not a Christian film. It sounds like it is, but it's really not. And so in the middle of this film, the main character, Orlando Bloom, he's given some land from his recently deceased father, who he didn't really know, and it's in the Kingdom of Heaven. It's all about the Crusades and about taking back the land for Israel and whatever. And so he's out there, and he's given this land, and this land's all just dry dirt. There's nothing there. His dad's never done anything with it. And he comes in, and the first thing he does is he has everyone look for water. So he drills, he dig down deep. And so they're digging down deep, and they find some water. And after a while, using that water, they irrigate all the land. And all of a sudden, things like life starts to come out of the ground, and things start to change. It becomes really green. And someone says to him, I can't believe what you've done with this land. And he replies with something that just really has always stuck with me. He says, what kind of man would I be if I didn't try and improve my land? And I think we can take that on board, all of us right now. What kind of people would we be if we didn't try and improve stuff, if we didn't try and build stuff? We'd be uncaring people. We'd be people that didn't really, or selfish people who didn't really want to think beyond themselves or to something greater than themselves. We'd just be thinking about what's in it for us. So the first thing we learn is what you care about, you build. Secondly, what Nehemiah did, this is from chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. It says this. It says, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? He showed up at Jerusalem, and he starts looking around. He hasn't got any resources to build, so what does he do? He looks at the rubble that he's got. This is the stuff that's been destroyed. It's the stuff that's been smashed to pieces by the invading forces and left because it's just worthless. And he looks, and these aren't these are big walls, right? These are things like walls that people used to live inside. They'll build houses within the walls, right? So there's a lot of rubble. He hasn't got the really nice dressed stone. I'm sure if he had a massive, massive budget, he'd just go and buy in all the really nice rock stone and whatever that's all cut nice, and he'd put it in place and cement it all. But he didn't. He had just the rubble. And he started to rebuild using the rubble. And at the start, people were taking the mick at him for it and saying, I can't believe that's what you're doing. How rubbish is that going to be? How rubbish is that going to look? But by the end of it, he made the wall. And so the second thing we learn about Nehemiah, or learn from Nehemiah, is he didn't rely on a wish list. He wasn't stood around waiting. I was trying to think of an illustration that may illustrate this. I don't know where you know. Now, I heard about a church who was building, renovating a massive building, and they didn't have the money to do all that. And so they just thought, well, what can we do? And so they asked people well, maybe you could help out. Have you heard about this church? They're quite famous. They check them out on YouTube. They asked people, hey, what can you do? What can you get involved with? Are there builders in the place? Are there plumbers in the place? Are there electricians in the place? And bit by bit, they began to build. And bit by bit, we will finish what we've started. He didn't rely on a wish list. He looked at what he had, and he started to build. He didn't have the resources he needed, but he built with what he had. The third thing we learn about Nehemiah, or learn from Nehemiah, is in chapter 6, verse 8 to 14. It says, I sent him this reply. So he's had this message sent out to him, and it's basically saying that he's up to no good, and they believe he's trying his best to undermine the king that's invaded the country. So he says this to him in reply. I sent him this reply, nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking our hands will grow too weak for the work. and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah.
Don't worry about it.
Simon, son of Deborah, the son of Matthew, who was shut up in his home. He said, let us meet in the house of God inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because the men are coming to kill you, and by night they are coming to kill you. But I said, should a man like me run away? I love that verse. Should a man like me run away? Or should one like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. Are we of those who shrink back and are destroyed? No, I'm not going to do that. He had this attack coming his way, and everything within him wanted to be distracted by it. To say, okay, yeah, stop working on the building. Stop working on the wall, because we've got this attack coming. We might be attacked and I might be killed, and so let's just focus on being safe. Let's go run and hide in the temple where they can't get to me. But instead he said, no, absolutely not. I'm going to keep building. He was bombarded by distractions, by threats, by bad press, by false accusations, but he ignored the distractions and he focused on building. Now, Sanballat and Tobiah, who were the ones who really wanted to put a stop to what he was doing, they twisted his intentions. How many times have people seen you do something or heard you say something, and you think you've got, like, everyone knows your intentions are good, and they come out and you hear that people are like talking as if you're up to no good, like they twist your intentions round, and you feel completely misunderstood. And this is what's happening to Nehemiah. They tried to make him think that their opposition was a threat, but he just said, no, it's not true. I'm not listening to it. He prayed to God about it, and he carried on. You know, there's so many things that the devil sends our way to try and distract us. God's really been speaking to me and Leah about this recently, in the last few months, about distractions. That's been a big word for us recently. That, you know, as things happen, we've felt like pulled away. We felt our brain has been like on the other things and not focused on the things that it should be focused on. But Nehemiah didn't allow that. He said, nope, not true, and just carried on. So he focused on the right things. How many times do we focus on sometimes the negative parts of our life? We've been saying this recently in the team a lot. You know, it's so easy to look at things that are negative and think, oh man, we've got to sort that out. And we've got to sort that out. And you forget sometimes about all the amazing things that God's done. We share a testimony like we did this morning about the taxman wants to give us £5,000 back. Next week we forgot about that. Because we're thinking about, because, I don't know, we're thinking about the fact that we've got to get something sorted in the cafe or I don't know, we need to purchase a fire system or something. And you get focused on those things. And before you know it, you're discouraged and you're down and you're depressed. But actually, the truth is, God is working everything around for good. And he has done so much good stuff already. We have to keep reminding ourselves of that and not focus on the negative things. And it's the same for you, like in your day-to-day life. How often do you focus on the negative? How often does someone say something to you and you assume they're thinking something about you? And it's not even true. Well, it might be, I don't know. But you don't know that, do you? And you go about life feeling discouraged and despondent because you're thinking all this stuff's going off. And actually, if you just say, you know what, I don't even know if that's true. I'm going to focus on the good things. I'm going to focus on that positive time I have with that person. Or I'm going to choose to believe that person wasn't speaking out of a negative thoughts about me, but speaking about it from a positive viewpoint of me. We can't allow distractions to affect us. And then the final thing that we learn about Nehemiah is that from chapter 4, verse 6 to 20, it says this, so we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. But when Sanballat and Tobiah, the Arabs and Ammonites, and the men of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together and come to fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the labourers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall.
So our enemy said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears and bows. And after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers and your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. When the enemy heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to his own work. And from that day on, half my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows and armour. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall, and those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the men who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. What we can learn from Nehemiah about that is that you protect what you build. You protect it. You care about it. You've invested in it. Hey, if you care about this church and you invest in this church, you'll defend it. If you care about your home and someone tries to invade your home, you'll defend it. You defend what you protect what you care about. And Nehemiah did that. And each of the people who were building the wall carried a sword with them to protect against the attack. So we learned that what you care about you build. We've learned not to rely on a wish list, but to crack on with what you've got. We've learned to focus on the right things, and we've learned from Nehemiah to protect what you build. And in chapter 6, verse 15 to 16, it says that, so the wall was completed on the 25th day of Elu, that's March. No, it's not. In 52 days, when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. And that's our goal at the end of it, that people will look at us as a church and will say, wow, look at what they did. It's obvious that they did that because God helped them. So actually, we don't want all the resources. We don't want all the time available. We want it to be difficult. Because at the end of it, we want to say, there's absolutely no way we could possibly have built that place without God's help. We want other people to look at us and say, flipping it, how did they manage that? There must be a God helping them. So, it's a few things for you to think about as you leave today. A few things that from what we've learned today that you can put into practice. The first thing I want to encourage you to do is to assess what you care about. Inspect your life. At the start there, when Nehemiah first went out to Jerusalem to look, he spent 3 days walking around it, just inspecting. He spent 3 days sussing out and finding out where he actually is at. I want to encourage you to have a real think. What is it you really care about? And does your actions match up with what you care about? Do you really care about church? Don't say you care about church and then come once in a blue moon. Don't say you care about family and then skip out on family activities. Don't, especially if you're been married into a family, decide to cancel birthday celebrations because you don't want them anymore, even though it's a Jenkinson tradition. I'm just pulling that out of the air. Sarah! Sorry, I got a Sarah in my throat then. Because what you care about, you will build. So assess your life. Go away from this today and have a real think. What do I care about? Because actually how I live and my actions will reflect what I care about. And you might think you care about some stuff, but actually really you don't. So really take some time to think about your life and assess that. Secondly, when you finish assessing, make a start. Make a start building regardless of what you have. Start small, build big. I was thinking the other day, me and Leah are always talking about how, we really want to go away somewhere like Tenerife or something, take the kids away. That's great, isn't it? It's a great kind of goal. But actually, it's not a goal, really. Because really, a goal would be to bring our family together, to have a family time together as a holiday. And actually, you don't need to go to Tenerife to do that, right? It's not really a goal, it's a want, it's a desire. I want to encourage you, you might be looking at your life and thinking, I want this, but actually that might not be the real goal. What can you do with what you have? Nehemiah had to settle for the rubble, but at the end of it, he built a strong wall. What can you build with what you've got? So make a start regardless of what you have. We've got to stop limiting our faith by deciding we don't have enough. Man, that to me, it's like a curse almost. I've even heard myself say it over the years, like, oh, we don't have enough for that. We don't have enough money for that. We don't have enough whatever for that. Actually, why do we limit ourselves when God's in heaven with all the resources? And if we start with believing God's given us everything that we need, we can just crack on. Yeah. Just get going. That's what we're doing through there. We're just cracking on. If we had £3 million, we just throw it at the building, we just pay a builder to come in and just do it. But we don't. But what do we have? We'll build with the rubble. Like Paul, he's a bit of rubble. The third thing that I want to encourage you to do from what we've learned from Nehemiah. So after you've assessed your life and what you care about, after you've made a start, the third thing is, this is really important, get rid of some distractions. What is the loudest voice in your life? Is it the failure or is it the win? Is it the negativity or is it the positivity? Is it the situation or is it the faith? Get rid of the distractions. Don't allow it. I'm trying to train myself now when things happen to go, just a distraction. Forget about it. Gone. It's really hard. It's not a natural thing. But if we can get in the habit of doing it, you'll be able to press on and keep going no matter what. So have a think about that. Let's stand to our feet. I want to welcome the band back up again. And just as we finish, I just want to encourage you, like, where could we be? Where could you be individually in your life in a year's time? Where could you be in 5 years' time? Where could you be in 10 years' time? Because I can know you stop it. You won't be dead. Give over. Can hear people going, in 20... Anyway. Where could you be? Because we always overestimate what we could do in the short time. We decide, yeah, we're going to do it, and we'll do it by tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes and it isn't done, we get discouraged and give up. But what could you do in a year's time? What could you do in 5 years' time? What could you have done by 10 years' time? I think you could have built some really good stuff in your life. And I think if we all rally together, which I know we always do, what could we do in this place in a year's time? How different. Think about how far God's brought us this year. How far could things be in another year's time? In 5 years' time? In 10 years' time? What kind of church would this be if we just started building with the rubble? Just started saying, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to crack on. I'm going to believe God for everything that I need. Amen.